Love driving my car, love long drives. And most of the reason I like that is because we end up playing car games with my kids, but one of the games I like to play with my youngest daughter is this or that. So, what, like hot dogs or hamburgers? Do you like the beach or the lake? And the question that always comes from my daughter is, she goes, what job do you like better? Do you like working at the hospital like you do right now? Or did you like working in journalism in the newsroom? And I told her, and I tell her every time, I love what I do right now. But at its peak, at its best, there is nothing on this planet like being a photojournalist. The things you see and the people you meet and just the things you get to experience is like nothing I can describe. Every day is different. Coming in on your days off, hitting the storms. When the shit hits the fan, you go to the fan. And I loved it every day. But the one thing, and I say this because I want you to understand this, as much as I loved it, there was one thing I absolutely did not love. I called it door duty. And so when something bad would happen, someone would die or something tragic would happen, one of your responsibilities, knocking on doors, going in neighborhoods, asking people about things. Now, I get it. There is an absolute nobility to it. People are more than the last moments in their life. They're not someone who was shot. They were someone, they were something to someone. There is people who depend on us to find out what happens in this world. But I will say it's a hard thing to do. And it's not something I enjoyed, but you do it because it's expected of you and it's important, and it's an important service you provide to your community. But that being said, it can be interesting. And when you're knocking on a door, you don't always know what you're going to get. You could get a person who's willing to talk to you. You can get a person who's going to slam a door in your face. You can get a person who's going to punch you in your face. You can get a person who's going to call the cops on you. And we've seen it all. And it's the best time to do it is when you have someone with you. And most times I was the driver, mostly because I had my photo gear in the car, and mostly because one of the guys I would always go with, Mike Argento, always thought that I was his chauffeur driver. So I would always end up being his driver no matter where I went. He's like, you're driving, okay, it's fine. And it's not bad. And when you're covering things, you talk to the person, you listen to music, you talk about all the great restaurants around here. So one day, Mike and I got a call. There was these two brothers who were arguing, and one brother ended up killing the other brother. So we get sent down, and it's like 10 in the morning. And so it's this real rural area, like really abandoned area of York County where it's like everyone's houses are like separated by woods. And so you're like, we're gonna go down, we're gonna knock on doors where no one's house is right off the road, and you gotta pull onto their property, and you gotta, then park. And so here we are all morning. And it's like 10 o'clock in the morning, and we're knocking on doors. And most times people aren't there because it's 10 o'clock in the morning during a weekday, so no one's there. So a few people were there. They didn't know what we were talking about. So at some point, we pull into this one driveway. Windy, forest-filled driveway where we pull up, and most times, it's a really nice day, so I kept the windows down. And most times, I would shut my car off when we would get to the house and we'd pull in. Or I'd leave it running sometimes, depending on how close it was to the house. So this one time, we pull in, and I would say that the house is probably about a good 30, 40 yards from where the edge of the driveway was, about 30, 40 yards to the house. So I turn the car off, windows are down. Mike and I walk toward the house. Mike walks toward the house like this. I walk over and look to the side, and I start walking toward a hill. It's a nice day, knocking on doors, and it's like this beautiful farm area, and you're looking over the hills, and suddenly I see something charging toward me. And I'm like, I got his eyes where I'm like, I can't see that well, so I'm like, what is that? And as it's getting closer, I'm starting to realize it's a dog. And he is full-blown charging at me. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't tell you what kind of dog it was, but in my mind, as I'm recounting the story, it's fucking Cujo that is coming my way. So I was looking for the kid. I just wanted to make sure before I dropped that F-bomb. So I'm like, he's charging towards me, and I'm like standing there for a second, and suddenly Mike's about a good 10 yards behind me, and he's still knocking on the door, and no one was there. So I turn around, and I just full-blown run. And I run at least close enough to Mike that I can yell, "Dog!" And so I don't know how long Mike like hesitated before he took off, but all I knew is that I didn't need to be faster than the dog. I needed to be faster than Mike. So we're running, and it's a good 30, 40 yards, and we get to my car, and I jump in my car, and Mike, I don't even remember how fast it was before he runs through gets in the other side, and next thing I know, there are 3 dogs jumping on my car. And I'm like, "Mike, where did these other dogs come from?" And he says, "Oh, they came out of the woods while we were running." And all I kept thinking is, like, in my mind, this is how I'm picturing it. I'm like, we're running, and then suddenly, like in those movies where there's spies, and there's suddenly these like attack dogs come out of the side on both sides of us, and we're running up in there. And Mike's like, "Oh, look, here's a dog jumping on the car. He has his window down." I'm like, "Roll your window up, man." And the dog is, now I don't remember again what kind of dog it was, but if you've ever seen The Sandlot, Hercules, the beast, was crawling with his slobbery ass mouth into my car. So I'm like, "Start the engine." That's all I kept thinking was, start the engine. Mike, I said, "Shut the window." So he's like getting the window up, and the dog, they're barking and jumping all over my car. And to be frank with you, I don't even know if there's any other dogs around, because I'm like, they're everywhere. And I'm like, all right. So I start the car, and I start to roll backwards, and I don't even know if there's anyone home. And I peek my window down just a little bit, and I'm just like, I don't know if there's anyone home, but I am gonna slowly roll my car back. I do not wanna hit your dog. So if you can come out and get them, but no one's responding. So I slowly start pulling back, and it's a windy kind of thing. And I'm like, I'm gonna hit a fucking dog, and I'm gonna kill this dog, and then someone's gonna yell at me. So we pull back, and we get out to the road, and I look at Mike, and I said, "Door duty's over. Like, I'm done. Like, I don't wanna do this. It's been a long one. We've been out for hours, and being chased by a dog is enough." So I get back to the newsroom, and we're telling the story. And of course, Mike blames me and says I never said anything when I ran by the dog. I just ran by him, and then the dog starts running toward him. So I said, no, I yelled dog. I did. You just didn't hear me. And so at some point, my one editor, she turns to us and she goes, "Did you get video of it?" So I said no. I said, I did not get video of the dog chasing Mike and I. Now, if I was farther enough ahead of Mike, I may have recorded Mike getting chased by the dog, but I was not gonna do that. So my daughter, she would hear a lot of these stories, and she would hear a lot about my passions and a lot about my love for what I do. So whenever that question comes out, and I say to her, is it this where I am now, or is it that where I was? 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10. I tell her it's that. So, thank you.